Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Fischer. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Lynx Technology Partners, and on behalf of the Cyversity New York Metro Chapter Leadership Team, I welcome you to our November monthly meeting. Just a little bit about our chapter. We have professional and student members. All are welcome, and at all levels, right? So from CISO to cyber major. Our monthly meetings are typically a learning event or a networking event. This month we'll feature a moderated panel, and the objective really is to explore diverse thinking on a compelling topic. How today's meeting will flow. So it's my absolute honor today on Veterans Day, a time when we recognize the service of all U.S. military veterans, and we're also celebrating National Veterans and Military Families Month throughout November. To host this very special event. Today's roundtable will feature a panel of distinguished CISOs, all of whom have tremendous accomplishments professionally in their careers and also as veterans. We want to express our thanks and gratitude to all of our panelists for their service to our great nation. And Q&A is absolutely welcomed, as you know, for those who have been to our meetings before know. You're more than welcome to post your questions to the chat during the session, and/or we've reserved time following the panel's questions to address any questions live that you may have. So with that, let me first begin introductions with a brief shout out to my colleagues on the New York City Metro Chapter Leadership Team, the President Kurby Brown, the Treasurer Jason Salas-Gonzalez, our Secretary Doyen Diallo, and our Chapter Advisor and National Board Member Eric Perminter. Eric is also a veteran, so I want to do a very special recognition and shout out and thank him for his service as well. As I said, we've got a very, very distinguished panel joining us today. Devon Bryan, who's Global CISO at Carnival, also the co-founder of Cyversity, by the way. And extra special guest there. He's an active advisor and he's active in academia, former CISO and leader at a variety of organizations in banking, Big Four consulting, government, Federal Reserve, also U.S. Air Force. Franklin Donahoe, who's the CEO at Lynx Technology Partners, and I have the pleasure of working with him every day. Also active in advisory on many nonprofit organizations and boards, former CISO and cyber leader at Mylan Pharma, at T-Mobile, Deloitte, Costco, and Marine as well. Andy Ellis, who's the advisory CISO at Orca Security, an investor, an advisor, also academic, very, very active in academia, and in tremendously impressive background, former CISO and transformational leader at Akamai, and also representing the U.S. Air Force. Kenneth Johnson, CISO at the Goddard School, former head of security at Randstad USA, leader at Cox Automotive and Mannheim, Visa, and again, tremendous experience and accomplishment, U.S. Air Force as well, and Bill Russell, who's happily retired, former CISO at Cummins, tremendous experience from Northrop Grumman and a number of other organizations as well, and background with the U.S. Army. So let's begin. Our first question that we'll pose is, 2020 research has found that 13% of Fortune 500 CISOs served in the U.S. military, which suggests that military experience not only lends itself to cyber careers, but may in fact contribute to career success and advancement. So what are your thoughts on this? And how did your military experience contribute and or translate to your success and complementing the skills needed for a career in cyber? Who would like to kick us off?
I'll jump in on this one, because this is a great example of where critical thinking is really necessary, because that statistic is not as suggestive as it might seem. While only 7% of the US population are veterans today, so you hear that 13%, you're like, wow, that's amazing. But among the 55 to 64-year-old cohort, 13% of all men are veterans. And that happens to match to the 13% where the average age of CIOs is 55%. Now, obviously, that doesn't account for women in the workforce at the CIO level, but I think we're all well aware of the challenges that enterprises have had with gender diversity and racial diversity there. So I want us to be careful to say, oh, clearly American corporations recognize the value of someone who is a veteran, because my experience is actually a little bit the opposite. I think we bring a lot, but when we use our military experience as a touchstone and say, oh, when I was in the military, we did it this way, it's very easy for people in technology companies to just immediately disregard what you said, even if it's applicable. Right? Because they're like, oh, that's the way the military does stuff, and we're not the military. So I think it's more about an internal transformation there, things you learn that you apply, rather than it being a source of expertise that people are going to look at you and say, oh, because you were in the military, you'll make a great enterprise leader.
You know, I want to, it's interesting because the terminology that we use in cyber is very much adopted from the military. Defense in depth is the perfect example. When people started talking about defense in depth, it's like, really, you know, it's all of these, you know, the physical to the cyber really does translate, even in the strategic areas. You know, in military intelligence, we talk about, you know, in joint intelligence, it's, you know, the three types of wars. You know, there's strategy, there's there's operational, and there's tactical, right? Those three types of intelligence, three types of, and we have adopted those things: threat intelligence, reconnaissance, you know, the MITRE attack. I mean, it's all very much transferable. And now, to answer the question directly, it's transferring all of that knowledge and understanding from the physical, for me, to the cyber side, and understanding that the methods are different because it's from the physical to technology, but the concepts are very similar and the same.
Yeah, so if I could just speak for a second as a representative of the senior service, the U.S. Army. As I came up through the ranks, unlike many of my distinguished peers and colleagues, I never had technical jobs. I was never an IT guy. I was never technical. When I was in my mid-career, I switched to the intelligence field in the Army. And as a leader, I gained a great deal of experience leading people who were engaged in highly technical endeavors. And that experience translated directly into cyber. I got into the cyber racket late in my Army career, actually as a sergeant major, when I found myself as the first sergeant major of the Army's Information Warfare Organization. And that experience of leading people and who were engaged in these highly technical endeavors is exactly the sort of thing that a CISO does. CISO job isn't especially technical. It's mostly about managing risk and really inspiring people to do their best work. And that's exactly what leaders in the military, no matter which branch it is, that's what they do. And I found that it prepared me very well for what I did after I retired from the Army and from active duty.
If I can comment on that, I think back, your question about the percentages really resonates with me, because I think back 20 years ago, when I transitioned from the military to the civilian sector, I recall a conversation with an employer. And during the interview, the employer asked, how do I feel that my military skills will translate into the civilian sector? And she confessed to say she had her concerns. And when I asked what were the concerns were that we were too regimented, we were too disciplined, we were too decision focused and execution focused versus strategic. And I thought, really? I mean, that's what the entire Department of Defense is all about, is trying to have a holistic view of how do we drive towards objectives, right? And the objectives are normally broader. You know, there's the battle and there's the war. And then when you think about where we are now as CISOs and where the industry is, our role is really to make sure that we win the war. And that requires trade-offs. And there are decisions we have to make sometimes that may or may not be favorable to all the audiences, but the idea is to stay focused on the end game. And I think the skills that we build and we bring from that military background, accountability, you know, collaboration, those are the keys to me that allow this industry to continue to grow and accomplish its mission. Because with cybersecurity and awareness, it's always about accountability, but it's also about knowledge, awareness, and making sure that people know what the right things are to do. And sometimes we make it bigger than it is. 90% of most people that are out there are trying to do the right things. So we empower them, if we enable them, and if we make them feel like they're part of the solution, it usually renders pretty good results. And that's what I always was taught when I was in the military. And I think that translated very well to the work that we do today, because we are influencers, right? We're decision makers at times. Other times we have to be collaborators to help build towards decisions. So I think it's a very, very tightly woven connection between the experience we bring to the table and the work we do today.
And I would echo much of what's been said before, but certainly, you know, again, you know, happy Veterans Day, you know, to all those who have served and those who continue to serve our great democracy. And also, you know, thanks to everybody who's made the time to join the webinar today, and certainly to our volunteers. And again, huge shout out to our New York chapters. I want to double click on the transferable skills, because, you know, certainly, you know, I think Andy said it well, that you're not going to just hire, Kenneth also touched on this, because you're former military. It's, you know, what do you bring to the table? How are those skills? How do they transfer and translate to your current assignment, right? And I think we reflect on, I think it was 1962. He was an Army general, definitely give him props, General Douglas MacArthur, who coined duty, honor, country, right? And we translate that to the corporate setting. You know, the only thing that changes there is, instead of country, you know, for a CISO in the private sector, let's just say, it's company, right? You know, so as a military practitioner, you know, the lessons that you learn about duty, right? And being committed to mission, having a sense of purpose, right? You know, making sure that you are going to do your darnest to make sure nothing bad happens on your watch, right? Honor, you know, certainly taking pride in what you do and how you do it. And then the organization that you serve, right? You know, as a uniformed, you know, military member, that was certainly our democracy, right? You know, private sector CISOs, most of us are directly supporting the top line revenue growth of our country. But some of those direct tenets and core principles around duty, honor, and country or company, you know, really manifest themselves well into how we show up day after day on the front lines. As a, you know, proud United States Air Force veteran of 11 years, you know, the 3 Air Force core values that were drilled into us early on in our careers, right? Those certainly also influence, me personally, in what I bring to the table as a chief information security officer at all the organizations I've worked with. The first Air Force core value is, you know, and I should quiz my fellow Air Force vets on this. First one is integrity first. Integrity first. That matters greatly, right? Because you have to have professional and personal integrity, right? You know, and you think about it, if that business leader doesn't trust you that you're going to keep your word, right, in what you say, right, you're not going to be able to establish that collaborative relationship, right? So integrity first matters, and it matters greatly. Service before self, right? You know, the needs of the company at times, you know, above your personal needs, right? So service before self also influences how, you know, I personally have shown up, you know, at the companies that have been privileged enough to lead their cybersecurity program. And the third matters greatly, especially in our field that changes so dynamically. And it's excellence in all we do. I was going to say technical excellence, but it's excellence in all we do, right? And again, in a field that changes so dynamically, you know, we have to deliver greatly, you know, for our organization. We have to stay on top of all the changes to make sure that, you know, we're doing our part to defend our organization. The other core principle that, as, you know, military practitioners, translates well into, again, what we're asked to do for a respective organization is that of teamwork, right? You know, cybersecurity is a team sport. We've heard that time and again, right? You know, those lessons are drilled into you as a service member. You know, at times when you're in the foxhole, you're in the trenches, right? You're out there on the front line. It's the person to your right and the person to your left, right? That means whether or not you go home, right, at the end of that mission, right? So being part of a team, seeing yourself as a part of a team, being able to collaborate, not just within your CISO organization, but across the board, broader organization as a team is also critical. So I'd say those are some of the definite, you know, military traits, military transferable skills that I've brought with me that have served me well throughout my career. CISO.
Awesome. And I want to thank all the panelists for those very, very insightful responses. And it's very interesting because each response to me lends itself in its own unique way to you know, another topic, right, that we're looking to cover through this exchange and dialogue, and that is around building a security culture. So, you know, one, yes, the transferable skills that an individual brings. And then as a leader, I think, as all of you have expressed, you know, how do you construct that type of culture and awareness and sensitivity and talent development, right, throughout your organizations? So let me go to the second question, which, you know, really is how have you built a security culture in your respective organizations, given the pandemic and the sort of new challenges or contrast to existing challenges that presents, right? How do we continue to define success in terms of building a security culture in the organization? And what advice you might have, right, for cybersecurity professionals at any level who want to influence and build that strong security culture within their own organizations?
Well, I want to start out. I want to jump in on this one. I have some very, it's an interesting thing for me as a security professional. And I'll relate this back to, you know, as a military person, as a vet. I currently serve in the Washington State Guard and commissioned as an Air Force person. So I'll say that, I'll give that up. I had to go to the Air Force side because I'm in cyber intelligence, and I'll just say that. But
find
I'll leave it there.
Intelligence in certain branches. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's the Army intelligence side, and then there's the Air Force, and I had to make a choice. So I chose Air Force. They have the better tools.
You finally learned about aiming high. It's okay, Franklin. Welcome into the fold.
It was a step back from the Marine Corps, but I'll take it. All right. Anyway, all jokes aside, there's something about culture that as a security profession, we have to all agree that it's not all about security. It's about the culture of the company. It's about how employees, in this case, really have their experience of belonging, their experience with the company and company and how they feel that they're valued or not. It's the neighbor principle, right? It's the lending to my neighbor. This is what I call it. It's like, if I lend something, if you've ever lent lent something to someone and then they return it to you and in a worse condition. That is a reflection on how they think about you. At least that's the way I feel. The way that people take care of something is a reflection on how they feel about it. At least that's one indicator to me. So when we ask people to care about the company, care about the assets of the company, to take care in their jobs and to scrutinize emails or whatever, we give them the security awareness and the training. That's only one part of it. People are only going to care about it if the culture of the company is related to the security culture and if it matches. And so when we talk about that as a security, professionals, we really have to ask the leaders of the company to make sure that the culture of the company, this is why DEI is important. This is why belonging is important. This is why, really having a strong brand and internal culture and enforcing that culture is important, because people have to care about the company that they're being asked to protect. The other thing is it has to matter to their jobs. One thing that I've always noticed throughout my career is we do this general security awareness and training, and then people ask themselves, what does that have to do with what I do on a daily basis? Why should that matter to me? It's the so what principle. If a person is at a retail location and they're just swiping stuff and pushing keys and taking payments, they have to understand that what process or part of their job, what it matters, what is it in their job that they should be looking for, why it matters that if they're at gas station pumps in the example of Costco, and getting people to inspect those gas pumps, right, and really understand the payment part. What does it look like, and why does that matter, and why does that affect the company? And then being able to log that, et cetera, et cetera. But all those things really have to matter to them and they can relate it to their jobs.
Thanks, Franklin. And any other thoughts from the panelists around security culture?
Yeah, I'll chime in. So in my view, especially coming from a military background, I was accustomed to having leaders talk about things that were important. And in the military, readiness and training, being prepared, integrity, those were all real important concepts. And you heard the generals and the colonels and the sergeants majors and the first sergeants talking about those things. And when you transition to civilian life, you find sometimes that the people that you run into who are leaders, you have an expectation for what those leaders embody, and it doesn't always match up. And so getting your leadership to buy into the importance of security and how that relates to the business of the company, whatever it may be, is absolutely critical. And it's one of the areas where when I transitioned fully into a civilian company at the Cummins Engine Company, having been in aerospace and defense with Northrop Grumman prior to that, they still had a lot of that military culture because so much of what they do is directly related to the military. But going to a company like Cummins, where that kind of culture had not been present in the past, one of my biggest challenges was really convincing the leadership of the company that the tone they set was going to directly influence how seriously all of the employees down the chain took all of the investments that we were making in cybersecurity and the time that we were investing in training our employees. And so getting the leadership buy-in and setting the tone at the top, I think was absolutely critical. And it was something that I took for granted when I was in the military, and getting a civilian company to match that was one of the big challenges that I saw and that I undertook in my role as the Chief Information Security Officer.
I think inside what Bill said, there's a really key point that's about a difference between military cultures and non-military cultures. And it's around the difference between the practice and what leadership is saying. Right? It's very important that leadership not deviate from the actual practice. Now, one of the benefits you get in the military is when you want to change the practice, sometimes you can, in fact, just assert, we're not going to do that anymore. And hopefully everybody listens as long as all the leadership repeats it and you monitor, and you can pivot on a dime when you need to. But that's an expensive thing. And there's this thing I often see happening in the workforce where people just want to command a new policy into place. Like, I wrote a policy and I will assert that this is the way the world now is. But now you have a discrepancy between what the actual practice is and what leadership is saying. And every time you do that, you undercut your own security culture. Because what you teach people is that they can ignore leadership because leadership ignores themselves, right? They say these things, but they're not putting it into practice. And so one of the key elements to building a great security culture is to actually change the practice before you tell people they have to. So you don't say, we're going to do this new thing, whether it's zero trust or whatever your favorite buzzword is, and then go start a pilot program. You start a pilot program, you start change management long before you tell everybody this is the way of the company, so that when you tell people they have to do something, there are already tools and practices in place to support them, rather than trying to push them by command, because that's dangerous. And the military very rarely does that, but people think that's how the military operates, that we just get to wave a magic command wand and everybody does what we want. And I only really see that behavior in the civilian workforce, and they complain and say, oh my God, this military model is awful. And I'm like, when I was in the military, like, that was not how we changed things unless something was so badly broken that you were willing to move hundreds of thousands of people overnight to change a problem that the military had. And I'm not saying the military is perfect. I think we all know some of the skeletons that the military has. But here's a place that's essential to building a good security culture, because you want everybody to see that you are not just there to yell at them and tell them that they are awful and that they don't care, but that you're actually there to support them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly touch on, in direct response to the question, right? Because the question is posed, how have you built a security culture in your organization, right? And my response would be simply, very carefully, very intentionally, very gradually, right? Certainly I've been privileged to work at organizations that are in their very nature conservative in their risk appetite. And that has helped, much of the stuff that I've driven at those organizations. And why that matters, it goes back to, some of the things that my fellow panelists have already touched on, and it distills to a quote that Peter Drucker coined, a couple of years ago, and it goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Right. So, if you step in, with your policies from on high, right. And to Franklin's point, the checkout teller in Costco doesn't understand the why, right. That strategy is going to fail. Right. And so being very sensitive to how do you, as the head of information security, right, influence corporate culture, not just your team, right? That might be and should be a little bit easier, but across the organization. Because, going back to cybersecurity is truly a team sport, right? And, if any CISO approaches her or his role thinking it's her or his team's responsibility to secure the entirety of the organization, you know, that's a failing proposition out of the gate, right? You know, they need to enroll, and that word is used very intentionally there, you know, the entirety of the organization to engage with them in protecting the organization. And so you have to be very intentional in how you, as the head of information security, cultivate that awareness culture across your organization to enroll everybody as a part of the cybersecurity team.
Fantastic. Thank you so much across the board. Just so many profound messages coming through there, right? And I think they really resonate with so many of us that have not only been in a leadership position, but in, you know, any position within an organization, and how you contribute, you know, to building that sense of culture, of responsibility, of you know, not only risk in a pure sense, but even more broadly, right? The whole reputational risk that a brand can suffer, you know, under the wrong circumstances. So very, very insightful. Thank you so much. In sort of taking that to the next step, right? When we talk about culture, I want to ask about diversity, both within cybersecurity and within, you know, culture more broadly. Obviously, a very critical component of Cyversity's mission is built around diversity and building that diverse pipeline of talent within cyber. So I want to ask each of you, you know, what advice you have for us at any level, CISOs to those just starting out. You know, for those in leadership positions, how do we achieve the diversity goals that we have within our organization? And for those just starting out, you know, how can diverse candidates stand out to a hiring manager? What are some things that you might have looked for, you know, in choosing individuals to not only, you know, work, but advance within your organization?
I'd love to jump in on that one if I can, Jennifer.
Sure.
Two things for me really jump out with that question. When you ask people what their passions are, often their passions differ from their professions out of necessity. So when you start talking about diversity in this field, it's well documented that this field is a male-dominated field. But I think there is an opportunity that is being missed because there's this groundswell of activity going around our country right now with STEM and women who code and all sorts of other groups out there that we have the pipeline to influence this next generation of security practitioners. But I think we have to do it in a way that's different from how we've approached it in the past. Influencing means getting the best out of people and allowing them to pursue what's important for them, not what's important to you. If I go recruit my next generation security practitioner, I don't want them to see this profession through my eyes. We have to create this avenue where they see the profession through their eyes. And I'll go back to what I think it was Franklin, my colleague, mentioned earlier. When you get the best out of people and you can relate it to what's important for them, there are fields out there and professions out there that have a direct correlation to what we do in cybersecurity. And I think we can take that unique approach and connect the dots. Just because you work in retail doesn't mean that there's not a clear line of vision between how that skill and that competency translates into how the work that we do in cybersecurity. But I think the approach is a little bit different today. We have to go out there and we have to look at the individuals and not try to pull individuals into cybersecurity. But I think we need to try to enroll, using my colleague's term, we need to try to enroll and embed what we stand for and what is the core competencies of this field try to ingest that into what the other people are doing in their professions, in their fields, in their industries. And I think we'll find this groundswell of excitement where they'll connect the dots. And suddenly they'll become a little bit more curious about this field, and we can make it a little easier to let them see what we do every day. When I came into this field, I didn't wake up one day and say, I want to be in cybersecurity. This field didn't exist when I came into technology. Yeah. But the way I became interested in this field is because the other things that I was doing evolved, and someone took the time to allow me to see how what I was doing related to what was becoming this information security practice. So I think we just need to not look at it as how do I pull more people into cybersecurity, but how do we embed what we do and what we stand for, and what are those core competencies that we bring into this field? How do we bring this out in those other fields and those other professions?
Oh, Bill, did you want to?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. I actually spoke quite a lot while I was working at Cummins about diversity here in Indiana and in the Midwest at various conferences and so forth. And I learned a lot about diversity in this role. Sometimes, especially after a military background, you kind of take diversity for granted because, you know, the Army was a pretty diverse environment. And I know that the other services also had pretty diverse populations. And among the things that I think were important, things that I learned from switching to a civilian company is in mentoring and in really developing the talent that you got. We were lucky, and we set up a program with our local community college where we tapped into their cybersecurity program and were able to get access to a wonderfully diverse population, lots of women, and you know, assigning those entry-level employees to a mentor. You want to be careful that you're not trying to turn that young woman that you've hired into a middle-aged white cybersecurity guy, because then you lose the value of the diversity of that person's perspective. About 20% of my staff were veterans. And I used to tell people all the time that if something was going on, something happening on the network, and we were all crowded around the analysts' monitors looking at the problem, if there were 8 of us and we were all veterans, we were all looking, we might as well have been looking through the same set of eyes, because we approached those problems the way we learned in DOD. And the fact is, we had problems that I was blind to. And I need those differing perspectives looking at the problems in order to really take advantage of the diversity of my staff. And so being careful to develop talent, but not try to change it and to make it like me, because I've been successful, you want to be like me. Actually, I want you to be like you, because your diverse perspective is a big part of the value that you bring to the organization. And so that would be one of the things that I would just encourage leaders who are developing and hiring diverse staff. Enjoy that diversity and recognize that it's the differing perspectives that brings the value. It's not the skin color, it's not the gender, it's the different perspective that they bring to solving the problems. And it's one of the most important things that as a leader that I think that I did with that organization that I turned over to my successor, is to develop that value of diversity within the organization.
Fantastic. So thank you. Other thoughts?
So yeah, this is a very complicated question, right? I look forward to the day when, the four of us who met at RSA in 2014 and decided that we were going to try to do the little that we could to leave the industry with a few more cyber women, cyber Black practitioners, cyber brown practitioners. I look forward to the day when that kind of necessity and urgency does not exist. I look forward to the day when there is no need for, women in cybersecurity, girls who code, Blacks in cyber, Latinos in cyber. I look forward to the day where, those issues, the fact that we're even having this conversation doesn't exist, right? There is no need for it, but that's just not the way it is right now, right? For, all the reasons that we know about. And it's a very complex issue because when we look at, and, it's not necessarily the absolute foundation for what makes a good cyber practitioner, but it's certainly an indicator. When we think about the levels of interests and actual participation in STEM-related discipline, and I know, again, huge caveat and disclaimer there, you don't need a STEM-related degree to be successful in cyber. I wanted to dispel that up front. But at the same point in time, there are aspects of our discipline that is highly and deeply technical and does require basis in science, technology, engineering, and math. So there's certainly a groundswell in our country right now because there's a realization that we are not getting enough of our elementary school, and it's important that we reflect on that. It's how far back does the pipeline start? If we start getting our children interested in, in technical career fields or related disciplines when they're in college, it's way too late, right? And so in order for us to solve for the problems that we're experiencing, with women still being 20% of cyber, Blacks and Latinos being a combined maybe 13, 14%, we're going to have to do something about the pipeline, right? We're going to have to do something about, how do we, insert and embed, an interest in what we do as practitioners much, much earlier. Right. I would argue, and, at each opportunity I get to speak about this topic, I would, implore our existing female cyber practitioners of all races, genders, creeds, religions, certainly our minority practitioners, to show up for career day. Show up for career day at your kids, your nieces, your nephews, your cousins, whomever, career day. Now that it's virtual, makes it even easier, right? Because our kids in the inner cities, right, especially our Black kids or Latino kids, it's important for them to see what they can be, right? And so, C1, B1, it matters, and it matters especially to communities who are currently underrepresented in our field. So I look forward to when we don't have to have a conversation about how do we bring more women into the field who can eventually go work at NSA as code breakers and code makers, right? Why don't we have more female CISOs in the Fortune 10? Right? Why don't we have more Black and brown practitioners, at CISOs of the Fortune 10? But we've got a pipeline problem that we have to solve for. And again, I fully disclaim, I know I'm probably going to get flamed about the STEM comment, because I too firmly believe that you don't need a STEM degree to be successful in cyber. It helps for some parts of it. Lastly, to just touch on your point, in terms of hiring execs, how we have to be intentional about making sure that, we are pulling from a diverse pool of candidates, right? So it's incumbent upon us to really, work with, partner with our HR department to take a hard look at the job descriptions, right? There's certainly, words that, eliminate candidates when placed on these position descriptions, right? So we have to be intentional about, how are we advertising for our jobs, right? We have to be intentional about who's on the screening and the final selection panels, right? And, also who's doing the interviews, right? So we have to be intentional in, partnering with our respective organizations to make sure the talent pool is as broad, is as diverse as it can be, because we're not going to get to make that final hiring selection if we didn't start out with a diverse pool of candidates in the first place. But this is a very difficult problem. If it wasn't, we wouldn't still be talking about it. If it wasn't, Cyversity wouldn't exist, right?
Right. Yeah.
Really?
And I want to, I want to just recognize the sort of exceptional variety and diversity of thought, even that we've experienced here today, right? And I just think it's just such an asset, right? For anyone looking to develop their career in cyber, also to reach out. We talked a little bit, I think, about the topic of mentoring, and that comes two ways too. I think, sometimes people, especially students, as outside of my professional world, as an academic and as a professor, I've noticed that sometimes students are just intimidated, right, when they think about cyber and they think about all of the complexity that's involved in something like that. So I just want to take a moment and sort of encourage anybody who's thinking about making that transition, or can I do it? Is it something that's for me? Even if to Devon's point, even if they're not a technical person, right? Maybe they don't have that STEM degree, or maybe that's not where their professional experience has been. Reach out to people. You'd be surprised. You'd be amazed what you'd find in terms of the what makes a real successful practitioner, right, in a number of areas. So I've been a little selfish in that all of the questions have come from me, so I want to open it up and give our membership and our audience an opportunity. I'm just taking a look at the chat, and there's
Sorry,
yeah.
Jennifer, sorry, I think Andy was going to wade in at the last point, so I don't know, Andy, if you want to go.
Oh, apologies, Andy. Go ahead.
Yeah, so while Jennifer looks for questions there. So
yeah,
two things, one for the people looking for jobs, and then one for the senior folks. If you're looking for a job out there, you have to be aggressive at this point about how you market yourself. So I challenge you to go look at your resume and find any words that are caveat words, like I helped this project succeed. Get rid of helped. That's not gonna help you out. Be a little bit aggressive. Don't lie. But you can be generous and aggressive, because your teammates aren't in the room with you to say, oh, well, you only did 60% and I did 40%. The second thing is, when you apply for a job, look at the job description. First of all, they are awful. They ask for a bazillion things they don't really care about. But find every keyword and put those keywords in your resume, because most companies are using filters to say, look, if you don't match these keywords, you don't get through to a recruiter. So all you have to do is add to your resume an aspiring skills section. I saw somebody do this. I'm looking to develop my skills in the following area. And then they would put the keywords for every technology in a job post there. And that way, when AI was scanning to see if you had the words, it would say, yep, you have the words. Now a recruiter gets to see you. So you got to be aggressive. You've got to get out there, because it's hard. And if if you're worried, you're saying, look, I don't want to go to a place that's going to interrogate me because I'm a woman or a person of color. Well, if they're going to interrogate you in the interview because you put yourself out there, they're probably not a company you want to land at anyway. So better to find out early rather than later. And for the CISOs and the hiring managers out there, I'm going to tell you that diversity is an emergent property. Like, you can look for lack of diversity and it will tell you you have a problem. But just trying to create diversity for its own sake is dangerous. Like, you should notice that you're not getting any applicants who are minorities or women, and go find applicants there. But don't just hire people because they're women or minorities. Like, you will create a problem for everybody. You really want to create an inclusive environment. And one way to do that is to value people's skills and not try to only hire security superstars. Like, hire people who can do the jobs you need done. If you need a technical writer, you don't need a cybersecurity professional to be a technical writer. You could hire a journalist. Guess what? Journalists are getting laid off left and right, and they are dirt cheap to hire. And you can teach them security skills. And that's a way for you to help develop more security talent in your pipeline.
And I'll make this succinct. What I used to ask my managers as they were hiring, how much are you willing to invest in a person to teach them what they don't know? What's the gap? Hire for passion, curiosity, because that's what it takes to be in cybersecurity. You have to be curious. What is their passion? To get back to what Kenneth said earlier, their passion. And then something Devon said, let's be careful what we're putting on the job descriptions out there. And then the question is, are we really willing to invest in people that we hire? Because that's the manager's responsibility, and holding my managers accountable for developing their people.
There's a really
Excellent.
good question in there,
Yeah.
Jennifer. Someone asked, would doing demonstrations like bug bounties be good advertisements for your skills? Oh, thank you.
It can be, if that's what your skill is. Now, if you don't have that skill, like, you can go practice it, go learn how to do these things on the side, but don't think, oh, I participated in a bug bounty program for one weekend and now that's going to get me a job. It's not, but it will teach you an awful lot about the penetration testing field, and some interesting about the economics of bug bounty programs that might surprise and shock you. So look, if you want to go learn something new and try it, always go do that, but do it because it's going to make you better than where you are, not because you think that's the thing that will magically land you a job.
And I would say for companies, start looking. There's a lot of self-learning out there that's not going to be reflected on people's resumes. There's so much more information out there than, the degrees. I've got plenty of degrees, but that's old school. It's what can I do nowadays? If I was entering the job market right now, I think that there would be some companies that would just look over my resume, say you have way too many degrees, or you've got this and that and the other. And it's about what you can practically do. You'll see Google and Amazon doing a lot of that type of hiring. I think that's the future as well. So go out there and learn, be able to reflect that in your resume, as Andy said as well.
And I think that ties back into culture, right? Because if the company's culture is built on the right foundation, when those candidates come in the door, I look for things that are more about the individual than it is about the company, because they're going to become a part of the company, and I can influence that once they're in the organization. But I want the people. I want your personality. I want your character. I want your integrity, so that when you come in the door, I feel like I'm getting someone to join the team who is original and authentic. I will take originality and authentic any day, and we can nurture skills. But I need, in this field in particular, I need your originality, I need your authenticity, and I need your integrity. So if that's who you are, I would prefer that we encourage these candidates to come into the door to be themselves, and don't try to portray yourself as something that you're not, as some technical guru, because that technical guru, you can only build a team with so many of those. You still need to have the other pieces to the puzzle if you're going to make a holistic team that's effective.
Excellent, KJ, thank you. And I want to combine, there are two questions that came in separately, but the theme is very similar. So in the last few minutes that we have, I kind of want to combine them. The one question is, how does one go about learning, I would say more of the, executive presence type thing, right? Speaking like a CISO, being able to communicate to executives and such. And sort of related to that, there was a question of, for people who may not have all of the qualifications listed on a job description, how can they be more aggressive in positioning themselves for an entry level or a starting point if they don't have everything to start off?
I guess I'll take a crack at the first one. I was very privileged, very lucky, very blessed, to be admitted into the commissioning program of the U.S. Air Force. So I started as an enlisted member, got accepted into the officer training program, and communications was a huge part of that. Being able to present in front of large audiences, as well as written and oral communications, was key there. So so that certainly set me on a path. I was also very blessed, very lucky. After serving at the IRS for about 6 or 7 years, I was admitted into the senior executive program, and I was sent off to a formal executive development program administered by OPM. But that was my path. I think Andy posted in the chat that don't follow my path because that doesn't exist anymore, right? Nowadays, I see a number of CISO academies that's administered by different organizations. I would also contend that some of the executive development programs at institutions like Wharton, Harvard, others, some of those are actually pretty good. I've sent a number of my deputy CISOs through those programs, and they've really been awesome. There's actually a couple of CISO development programs, with the organizations I'm affiliated with, actually has a pretty good one as well. But there are a number of those out there that helps with the executive presence and executive leadership skills, for folks who are at that level. For folks looking to break in, the challenges and, the opportunities are a lot more abundant, I would say. There are a number of free and online certificate-based and certification-based as well programs that are available. I know, thanks again to our great sponsors at Cyversity, we've partnered with Google, we've partnered with SANS. We have a number of opportunities available for our members to get them some of those hands-on skills. But certainly defer to others to weigh in and add any additional color to that one.
I think you can listen to a lot of the people you want to emulate and then ask yourself why they did something that isn't what you would have done, right? You felt very passionately that there was this bad, security practice about to happen, and your CISO walked in and they soft pedaled. Right? And that moment of jarring is a learning opportunity for you. Ask yourself why they did that. And if you can't figure it out, ask them or an intermediate manager. Like, almost everybody's happy to mentor. Like, my favorite mentoring is when somebody would come up to me and said, I was really angry because I thought we had a slam dunk. This was an awful practice. And I got to explain to them why, like, walking in hard into that room would have been defeating for us. But you have that opportunity. If you're invited to a Slack community, like, join in and listen, like, pay attention, not just to the most senior people. Like, you could listen to Devon and I all you'd like, but the people who might really have things to teach you might be the people who are just 1 or 2 pay grades ahead of you. They're maybe 5 years further on in their career. Listen to the lessons that they're willing to share with each other and with you. And so I don't know if Cyversity has like a Slack channel or online community that's active, but if it is, y'all should join that and be active in it and use that as a place to ask questions and listen to your peers and to the people you want to emulate.
Perfect. Incredibly sound advice. And we are at the top of the hour. On that note, and sort of the whole tie back to Cyversity, I would encourage everyone to explore the resources that are available to you through Cyversity. If you have questions about that or about membership or about, you want to get more involved, feel free to reach out to us. You can go to the website, of course, or email us, nyc@cyversity.org. I want to thank, so grateful for today's panel. It was amazing. And I hope that our panelists will come back either for a fireside chat or other events that we're hosting. We would certainly love to continue the conversation. And I want to wish everyone an incredibly happy Veterans Day and enjoy Veterans and Military Families Month for the rest of November. Thank you.
I just want to add, Jennifer, just if you can fill out the survey, I reposted it in the chat to help us know what you want to hear the next time we get together.
Absolutely, Kurby.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Oh.
Good work, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Kurby.
I fight win.